Uh, Hi, good afternoon. I would like to start us off with a brief statistic that invasive species, both plants and animals, cost Virginia alone $1 billion every single year in both mitigation and ecological damage. And if you know anything about Virginia invasive plants, then you might recognize a couple of these names here: tree of heaven, Chinese privet, and autumn olive. But all three of these are larger and frankly, as invasive as they are, a little easier to deal with than the plants that we focused on this summer. And this is our project, which was to identify both the drivers and how and where these invasive plants spread. I'm Arie, this is Noah. We worked in collaboration with Robert Rose and the IC, and we were with Friends of Dragon Run, and this is the Dragon Run.
Yeah, so as Ari said, our research over the summer was in the Dragon Run watershed. It's a pristine blackwater swamp in Virginia's Middle Peninsula, about an hour north of here, that contains a multitude of rare and endangered species. And our research partners were the Friends of Dragon Run, which is a nonprofit, volunteer-based organization that manages several properties within the watershed. And like many protected areas within the Southeast, the Dragon Run is facing challenges with invasive species. So, in order to help address those challenges, me and Ari identified two of the most noxious weeds within the Dragon Run, and that's Chinese bush clover and Japanese honeysuckle. And I'll let Ari talk about the latter.
Yeah. Japanese honeysuckle, if you're unfamiliar, is a small, opportunistic, woody stem vine that covers large tracts of land and can smother out smaller native vegetation, which has cascading impacts going up the food chain. And so my few objectives for this was, first, we have to determine where actually in the Dragon Run this native invasive plant can be found, develop a habitat suitability model, which would be a map that shows where it is most likely to be found. Using that, determine areas that are most at risk and in need of prioritization in terms of mitigation efforts, and then determine cost estimates using that. So our approach, we made very, very frequent trips to the Dragon Run this summer. I spent a lot of time there just going around with the GPS tracker and getting as many occurrence points as I could. And all of this going towards the mapping that would influence where it might be found. And so right off the bat, it was way more prevalent in the Dragon Run than previously thought. I alone got 837 individual points for Japanese honeysuckle, and I believe that to be an underestimate. And this was only across 3 properties within Dragon Run. However, the good news is that I believe a lot of this is in the early stages of invasion and just really emphasizes the need to get, prioritize areas that we should start mitigating this. And so if you are unfamiliar with the habitat suitability model, it essentially takes a lot of different layers like this: distance to water, tree cover, etc., combines them into one singular map showing where the species is most likely to be found. And after taking all of these and weighting them with these respective weights, came out to this final model, which is over the entire course of the Dragon Run. And these red things here specifically are Dragon Run properties. And even further zoomed in, you can see the individual plants that I took with the GPS tracker. And so everything in green is much more likely to be found, Japanese honeysuckle. Everything in red, least likely.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, my research focused on bush clovers. So bush clovers are small to medium-sized shrubby legumes that thrive in grasslands and prairies. And although the Dragon Run is a swampy watershed, it still has many properties that fall under those categories. And within those properties, there are several native bush clovers, including the trailing bush clover, the slender bush clover, and the violet bush clover. And these species serve as a vital part of the native food chain as a food source for local species. But the invasive bush clover is coming in and outcompeting these native species due to its lack of viability as a food source for the local animals. So in order to help address this issue, I asked the question, how prevalent are Chinese bush clovers in the Dragon Run watershed? And how does the presence of Chinese bush clover affect the presence of natives within the Dragon Run? So me and Ari have a pretty similar overall methods and timelines, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But I also went into the field, visiting several Dragon Run properties, cataloging all the bush clovers I found, the invasive and the natives alike, their size, the composition of each cluster, where they were. I took it back, I got it ready for my GIS software, and I developed these maps. So on the left, you can see the Chinese bush clovers. On the right, you can see the native bush clovers. And you can take a second to look over the legend that'll help you interpret it a bit. But generally, the main message here is that there's a significantly higher amount of Chinese bush clovers compared to the natives. And among the instances of the Chinese bush clovers, there is typically a higher density compared to that of the native instances. So after plotting this and seeing where the Chinese bush clover already is, I wanted to have a better idea of where else in the Dragon Run these instances could be. And that led me to also making a habitat suitability model. So these are the layers that I chose where the red areas are unsuitable for Chinese bush clover and the green areas are suitable, and the yellow areas and orange that you can't really see, but the yellow areas are just a in-between value, and these are the weights that I used. And that led me to developing this final habitat suitability model where the green areas are highly suitable and the yellow areas are somewhat suitable and the orange areas are unsuitable. And as you can see, large amounts of the Dragon Run watershed have at least some suitability for Chinese bush clover, if not high suitability. And these numbers were reflected in the stats I got after going through all my field data, where you can see that there's a much higher proportion of Chinese bush clover compared to natives, especially the violet and slender. You can see their populations are certainly dwindling compared to the invasive Chinese bush clover.
So what does this actually mean for the Dragon Run and Friends of Dragon Run? Both of our habitat suitability models are ranked everything on a scale of 0 to 1. And so high suitability hotspots of 0.7 and above are areas and acreage that Friends of Dragon Run should prioritize mitigation. And every single acre could fall within the $400 to $600 range, depending on methods of removal, be that herbicide or mechanical pulling. But we hope that these maps and our findings can help Friends of Dragon Run find areas that are most in need of mitigation and most at risk. And we would like to thank our partners at Friends of Dragon Run and everyone in the IIC who has helped us and been so generous with their time. Thank you all.
So Robin and Jeff from Friends of Dragon Run made this beautiful slide thanking Noah and Arie. I guess I'll read through it a bit. Working to preserve, protect, and encourage wise use of the Dragon Run watershed, Noah and Arie have furthered our understanding of the risk to native habitats for invasive plants. They're important were their individual contributions to our planning for mitigating the risk, costs, and landscape changes presented by Japanese honeysuckle and Chinese bush clover. They focused on challenges to get community consensus, resources, milestones, and actions. You're both great individuals to work with on solutions for the natural world as well as our communities. So thank you from the Friends of the Dragon Run. Robin and Jeff, I think you're joining over Zoom. We just want to thank